Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. David Graves, an experienced biblical archaeologist and CEO of Electronic Christian Media. I'm here today with another exciting episode on our Archaeology Discoveries channel, where we discuss important archaeological artifacts related to the Bible. Thanks for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe to our channel.
Well, good morning to everybody. My name is Dr. George Sparks, and this is Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down, sponsored by Bible Interact. Today I have a special guest, Dr. David Graves, PhD. I can see you're at a specific location right now, and you told me that's Tel El Hammam, north of the Dead Sea. Is that correct?
That's right.
And it looks like we're going to be talking about excavations, and it looks like this is going to be a lot of fun. It looks very interesting. But before we get there, you got to tell them about who you are. All right. So, well, Dr. David Graves, PhD from the University of Aberdeen, Scotland, a native of Canada, has been involved in teaching the Bible and archaeology for more than 35 years. A retired assistant professor from Liberty University, Rawlings School of Divinity, Lynchburg, Virginia. He has taught archaeology at Oxford University, England, provided tours at the Ashmolean, as well as the British Museum, has also traveled extensively in the Middle East, been involved in the Mount Ararat research, consultant for the National Geographic Productions. He has been involved in archaeological excavations at Qumran, the Temple Mount, and also Shiloh in Israel, as well as Tel El Hammam. That's the photograph behind him at this time. Tel El Hammam excavation project in Jordan. In 2017, he was part of a team who excavated Dead Sea Scroll Cave 53 near Qumran, with the discovery of evidence of Dead Sea Scrolls. The cave is now identified as Q, meaning Qumran, Q12. For many years, David has been a field supervisor at the Tel El Hammam excavation. Also, he is the excavator who found the city of Livias, an ancient Roman and Byzantine city during the Roman and Byzantine period. He is also a part of NEAS, the Near Eastern Archaeological Society. He has authored a number of books published through his company, Electronic Christian Media, ECM. In addition, he has authored a number of journal articles on the Bible and archaeology, mostly available through academia.edu. Dr. Graves, welcome to the program once again. I know this is going to be a lot of fun and interesting. What do you have for us?
Good, George, to be with you. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk about the best archaeological study Bible. And this might be interesting to our viewers as to which one is the best. And as far as I'm aware, there's only two of them on the market. If there's more, it'd be great to hear from the viewers, but I've only identified two of them. We've got the two of them beside me here in the photograph. So we're going to talk about the NIV Archaeological Study Bible and the ESV Archaeology Study Bible today. We're going to compare the two of them. The NIV was published in 2005, and the ESV, it was published in 2017. So there's about a 12-year gap between the two of them, which is like an eternity in archaeological terms. We're going to compare the two and see how they compare side by side. The viewers can decide on which one they think is the best. This is what they look like, a typical page in the Archaeological Study Bible of the NIV. I've compared the Amarna letter page for the two of them. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that the NIV is a little more colorful. They have these nice headings, picture of a sunset over some pillars, ancient people, lands, and rulers. And then they have the Amarna tablets and the Hebrew. And you'll notice that the pages are nicely colored. The edges are kind of faded, and they've got nice headings. The font is about the same size in both the NIV text. You can see the references there to the left. The ESV has the references for the ESV text at the bottom of the page, and then the color photographs of an Amarna letter or tablet on each of the pages. The photographs are pretty good in both. The font is a little bit smaller in the ESV articles compared with the biblical text itself. So those are some aesthetic ideas that you see. There's good footnotes down here at the bottom of the NIV as well. A lot of them refer to other articles in the Bible, to other locations where this material is located. Not so much with the ESV. Both photographs have credentials below them. Let's look at some of the statistics now with the two. The ESV is not so colorful on the pages. It's just the plain text with a sort of a drop-in box. Sometimes a photograph is literally in the footnote itself, just a picture with a short description. So when we compare the two of them, the stats on them, the pages there's about 300 pages more in the NIV Study Bible, 2005. The font is a little bit smaller in the NIV and a little bit larger in the ESV. I didn't exactly able to determine the font size, but you might compare it to like a 10-point font here and a 12-point font in the ESV. So when you compare those two things together, because the font is smaller in the NIV, there's a whole lot more material in the ESV as there is compared to the ESV. The authors and contributors, they don't list them in the NIV, which I think is kind of sad. I would have liked to have known who the individuals were that wrote the material. I do have a inside story about Dr. Bryant Wood has written probably about a third of them, I'm told. I reached out to him, but I didn't hear from him as of yet. But the ESV lists about 15. I know probably I know the majority of them, and I know probably about 6 of them personally and have dug with them. So there are some friends that are involved with the ESV, Boyd Sievers and who else was there? Mark Wilson, and he did some stuff for Revelation. He's a good friend. But they're listed, and they have a little bit of a bio in the ESV. The articles, there's 520 in the NIV and 2,000 in the ESV. Now, I find that a little bit misleading because really it's not 2,000 articles. Sometimes it's simply a photograph with a little note in a footnote. So they call that an article. I'm not so sure. The NIV were the 520 are like I showed you on Amarna tablets, nice, long, well-described descriptions in that one. Photographs, 500 in the NIV, 400 in the ESV, and the maps, there's 14 in the NIV in the back. And then the ESV has they have 200, but they're kind of scattered throughout the text. And they're kind of helpful. You see Joshua's conquest of Canaan, and they might have some arrows. And so they have some nice maps that help as you're reading the text. Sidebars, there's 200 in the ESV. And that's quite similar to, I think, the articles that you find in the NIV, these sidebars. Long articles are 14 in the ESV. The NIV, they're all kind of long articles, but what they mean by the long articles in the ESV is that they're probably 3 or 4 pages of a particular topic, like the history of archaeology. They've got a little section in there written by someone. So that's kind of nice. Footnotes, yes, they both have footnotes. The article index I thought was really interesting. There's 32 pages in the NIV. And I really like their index. Here's my ESV. I've got a leather-bound one that I've been using for years, but I'll give you an example. For the index inside, you might have something like Gallio. So you can look up, it's more like a chronological index, or it's like a subject index, but you've got 4 different articles. It gives the scripture reference. So Gallio, proconsul of Achaia, Acts 18, and then you get a page number of 1806. So you get a scripture reference as well as a page number. The Roman governor, he's mentioned there as well. Paul's visit and letter to Corinth, the page number there in the scripture, and the judgment seat. So you get a good cross-section of how to find the material that you're looking for from that index. 32 pages of it, and I find it really detailed. The ESV, only 4 pages, and only lists the sidebars. And so the sidebars are the 200 articles. So it's not really that involved. You can find some of the sidebars, but you can't find really much else. So I think that's a bit of a drawback for the ESV. The concordance pages, same thing, 166 pages in the NIV. Well, there's only 65 pages in the ESV. The bibliography, there's no bibliography in the NIV. There's a small bibliography in the ESV to some of the articles. So for research, that's helpful. Glossary, the glossary page, there's 10 pages of glossary compared to only 4 pages in the ESV. So the ESV is not as detailed with helping the reader to find the material. Now, the background to it, the publishing team was based for the NIV at Gordon Conwell Seminary. I had a lot of good friends actually that went there. And the editor is Walter Kaiser Jr. from for the NIV. I used one of his books in my undergrad seminary. He's a good scholar. John Currid from Reformed Theological Seminary was the editor and team that headed up the ESV project in 2017. So let's go over some of this a little bit more. The NIV, more pages, 285 in the NIV compared to the ESV. The font's larger in the ESV, but the material is not as much. Again, authors, 15, who knows how many in the NIV, but they're good. The articles that are written are very good, are really well done in the NIV. The photos, there's 100 more photos in the NIV. The maps more in the ESV, but they're kind of scattered throughout the text. And sidebars as well, 200. Longer articles, 14. Footnotes, a little bit more detail in the ESV, but again, they put a lot of their article material in the footnotes. And article index, NIV is better. Concordance is better in the NIV. Bibliographies better in the ESV. As far as the content is concerned, the publishers in the NIV hold to more of a maximalist view, whereas the material in the ESV is more along the lines of a minimalist view. I'm going to look at that a little bit because I think that's quite interesting. What do we mean by that for those that are probably new to this idea? Maximalist means the maximalist amount of history. So they, from an archaeological perspective, they take more of a maximal amount of history. They accept the historical record is more historical, whereas the ESV, the minimalist view, is a little bit more on the, we're not taking, there's a little bit more myth there, and we're not quite sure of the dating. They take a late date to the Exodus, whereas the NIV focuses more on the early date and presents both views. The ESV sometimes doesn't present both views. I'm going to look at that in more detail. I'm not as happy with that. Here we have the typical page, what it looks like for the Amarna tablets, as we looked at earlier. As I said, Dr. Bryant Wood has written a lot of these articles, and they're well written. He's an experienced archaeologist, formerly trained at the University of Toronto in Philistine pottery and experienced out in the field at Telemacotter, and has written for the Bible in Spade for many, many years. He's the editor to that. So he's well informed, and the articles are well written. But on the cities of the plain, for example, he doesn't mention Tel El Hammam, although, to be honest, 2005, when it was published, was the first season we dug at Tel El Hammam. He was aware of it because he mentions it here, since Baba Dra is the largest ancient ruin in the region. It stands to reason that it should be identified as Sodom. So that's typical signature for Dr. Bryant Wood. That's what he argues. I disagree with that, but to be honest, we've done 15 years of excavation there after 2005, so a lot of that information wasn't available when this was written. So that has to be kept in context as well. So that's the material in the cities of the plain. And then Sodom and Gomorrah, the little article on that. Similar, we have no mention of Baba Dra, but we have a focus on, or no mention of Tel El Hammam, sorry. It focuses on Baba Dra, and it focuses, there's Baba Dra right there, the occupation levels. So it focuses on the material that Bryant Wood had written in that, at that time period. And early bronze occupation level, although a layer of ash and burned debris has been discovered. So the material that he puts in here is accurate to the excavation that he's talking about here of Baba Dra, but doesn't mention Tel El Hammam because it hasn't been excavated yet. And the dating as well, he puts the dating in there. I've got some question marks in my Bible that I put here, questioning some of the things. But now if I flip over to the ESV, it mentions Tel El Hammam, but very little information. It identifies it with Abel Shittim. And the NIV does the same thing. And the map, however, for Sodom, this is really all the information we have in the ESV on Sodom. It places Sodom down here at Baba Dra. It doesn't say Baba Dra, but that's where Baba Dra is located. It's in the southern area of the Dead Sea. So that's a bit misleading. It assumes that the cities of the plain are all down here in the southern end of the Dead Sea on one of their maps. However, Tel El Hammam is up here, and this is where we believe Sodom is today. They should know that. And this was written in 2017. So after we've excavated at this site at Tel El Hammam for so many years, they should at least put it in as an option, but they don't. So I find this to be misleading. And when I did a review for the ESV publishers, I actually mentioned to them, you should be fairer with their evidence, at least giving both sides of the story. And they said, oh, we're too far along in our editorial process to make any changes. I wasn't impressed. So I just find the ESV material to be slanted toward a view, and they don't give two options, whereas the NIV one does. And they also, on their other map, again, do the same thing, placing Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah and Zeboim down here in the south end of the Dead Sea, where Bryant Wood placed it. And Tel El Hammam is up here. They don't even put that in there. They don't even mention as Livius. Now, in contrast, the Harvest Handbook of the Bible lands has been put out in 2019. I had the privilege of putting a lot of articles in this, but the section on the discovery of and excavation of Sodom focuses on Tel El Hammam. What's interesting is that the foreword to this book is written by Dr. Walter Kaiser Jr., who also was the editor to the New International Version. So he's familiar with the research and has written the foreword to this particular book that focuses on the discovery of Sodom and the north end of the Dead Sea. Here's one of my articles that I published on Alexander the Great. So I've got 8 breakout articles in this handbook and 40 photographs that I've contributed to it. So this is a good companion to place beside your study Bible, I think, and realizing that archaeology continues to develop. There are new discoveries all the time. You can't rely on just one source. The map in the handbook, Harvest Handbook, as well places Sodom here at the north end of the Dead Sea, and Gomorrah, Zeboim, and Admah. And so the maps are placing it now on the north end of the Dead Sea, not down here, the south end of the Dead Sea. And it places Zoar here, which I find interesting. The Madaba map places Zoar down here. But you have to realize that the Madaba map doesn't have the Lisan, the bottom part of the Dead Sea on their map also. So it kind of places Zoar up here. So a little more accurate material, most recent in the Harvest Handbook. Of the two of them, I would recommend the NIV as being probably the better resource. I like the articles better myself. The ESV leaning a little bit more on the liberal side. Like I said, they put forward their arguments on the conquest and the late date for the Exodus, and they base it on that, and they don't take into consideration the early date, whereas the NIV places a focus on the early date, but does also give the options of the late date in their articles. So a little fairer scholarship, I think, in the NIV Archaeological Study Bible, even though it's, a little bit older, 14 or 12, 13 years older than the ESV. So that's my take on the two. I'd get them both, and you can compare and contrast. And I also get the Harvest Handbook thrown in as the most recent research in the ancient Near East. And having those three, you'll have a good resource for your archaeology and your Bible study. So that's my take on it.
Okay, I appreciate that. That was very informative at the levels of what to expect when you purchase the book, because if somebody's going to buy a book on archaeology, they'll probably just say, well, you just named 3. So there's not a huge selections when you're in this area. Now let me ask you another thing, because the NIV, I got the hard copy, but I also got the Kindle download.
Okay, yeah.
So for the listening audience, if you say, well, I don't want all these 3 books, you don't have to have all these 3 books on the shelf. You can actually download these now too. Yep. And from what I remember, they're not, for the information and the content, it's not that expensive for resource material. And you're looking at all the effort that has went into the publishing and the pictures. And it's going to give you, as Dr. Graves has said, the opinions. And I appreciate that you did mention, that was very fair, that the NIV looks more like a minimalist viewpoint. That means they're taking the biblical events as actually happening, whereas the ESV has, you could say, more of a minimalist view, where they're looking at it where some of these events in the Bible could stem from tradition.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't see if what you're doing, if somebody's wanting to do is a background research in a study. When you said get all 3, I agree. Get all 3. You said the Harvest Handbook is the latest, so it's going to have some of the more recent.
Yeah.
So here we got a huge comparison between all 3.
And I would say get a couple more of my books. Archaeology in the Old Testament, Archaeology in the New Testament. Put that in there on your shelf too. You'll have a real good cross section. The newer one is the Archaeology of the Old Testament and the Archaeology of the New Testament. Same similar material, but I divided it up differently in the Old Testament and the New Testament and the new books. So with those companion books, if you had if you had 5 books on archaeology, the NIV and the ESV. I like the ESV, the translation myself. I wish that the material, the notes that I have in my NIV one was in my other Bible. So that's why I have the 2 of them. But they're big books.
Oh, here you go. So here they go right here.
Oh, there's the Old Testament, New Testament. Yeah, those are the newest ones, and those are the 2 I would recommend. They have total of 160 artifacts in them.
Quite a few, lot of material. And
Yeah, George, the front cover says what 100 and that's 75 and that's 115. So yeah,
okay.
190 artifacts I consider in those 2 books. And all the references and footnotes. So that will give you a real good resource for all kinds of material.
Yeah, I know I'm flipping through them right now because you got a lot of, you can say in some books you got color pictures. These are black and whites. But
Yeah,
look at all
folks
the different
folks,
illustrations.
depending on their budget, can get the color. I recommend the color ones because everything seems better in color. But they're available in black and white if you wanted to get the cheaper version and just wanted to look at the footnotes. But I like them. I'm a graphics guy. I like the images. And that's why I like the NIV Study Bible. It's brightly colored. Every page is color. The ESV is color as well, but the page itself is just white, whereas the ESV gives a much more of a textured. It's like you're reading a scroll or something.
All right. So now, actually, what we did is we described four different resources. We got the Harvest and the ESV, NIV, and then Dr. Graves' selection that we just showed everybody.
Sure.
And I think that's very fair that we did mention that the idea of maximalist, minimalist, the breakaway illustrations, the variant interpretations, where you showed your friend Dr. Bryant Wood, and of course, if you've been in the field for a while, there'll be certain little things we'll say, well, that sounds like Bryant Wood. That sounds like Steve Collins. Or that sounds like Bill Deaver. Well, that sounds like Jody Magnus. It's you just get to, and that's very true.
As I say, their fingerprints are all over it. Their articles.
Yeah. Just get aware of who they are for a while, then it shows. We didn't even have to show a picture or put their name there. You just read it and say, you know what, this is. I said, I don't know. He's in here somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I know Bryant did them. I heard a friend of mine say that he did a third of the articles. And like I said, I see his fingerprints all over. I reached out to Bryant, haven't heard from him. I hope he's well. He's getting up there in years like I am. And it's not like him not to respond to me in an email. So if I hear tell, we'll give an update later if I get word from him. But I'm pretty positive that a lot of the articles were written by Bryant and good material. I agree with a lot of the material that his material on Ai and Jericho is in there as well. It's got his fingerprints on it. But what I like about the NIV is it does seem to give both views, whereas the ESV seems to be quite slanted and they don't. So I just don't like that kind of scholarship where the biases are not laid out clearly for the reader, and they think that everything that they read is gospel truth when it's not.
Well, that's true for the general population and the laity. If they just read that one, they're going to say, well, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of bias out there, and it takes a while to sift through it and to understand where each you could say each side of the spectrum is coming from. And it
Yeah.
takes a while, folks. It really does to get the hang of it because it isn't just the literature; it's also the archaeology
Yeah.
and saying, well, uh,
I
it can
was,
get into a lot of detail. It
and I
can.
like the ESV a lot. And I was so excited when I heard about this archaeological study Bible was going to be coming out on with the ESV translation. And I thought, well, great. And then I got it. And I started reading the articles, and I was disappointed in how biased and just to focus on the late date, but not even giving anybody the reader uh, the idea or option that there's an early date that
Right.
people could adhere to. And then when I look back to a lot of the schools that were involved, the Covenant Reformed Theological Seminary and the Reformed Theological Seminary and John Currid, they should have known better than that. They should know to be a little fair with the evidence. So, and again, the maps, I was disappointed in some of those maps because people, they see a map and they see a name on a map, even though they put a question mark, beside it. For example, Bethel and I, they have it up in the same general area. For I, they put a question mark. Well, that's fair, but there's really no debate as to the area, the region where it's located. It's in that same little vicinity of about a mile from each other. So you have, Et Tel at one spot, and then you have Kiryat Makader in another spot. They're across the road from one another. So to put a question mark there is really deceptive. It's just like we really don't know where it's located. Well, we know the general region. It's pretty close to that spot where that dot is.
Yeah, I understand what you're
Misleading.
saying, but you'd have to be into the field to take a look at that question mark and say, well, I know that there's a lot of bias and debate between the two. Once again, dealing with maximalism and minimalism, and you understand that. So if somebody didn't want to get big involved and all, just put a question mark. That'd be like the Exodus. When I was doing lectures at the museum, and you got groups of people, and you get to the time period of the Exodus,
Yeah.
and there's going to be early daters and late date, and there might even base your presentation on where you put the Exodus. So I thought, I don't want to stop there and be all hung up because you still got other parts of the presentation to go because the Exodus would be in, I'll just say the late Bronze Age, 1550, 1200 BC, basically. Okay. And then you're going to go on to the time period, the judges and the kings. And of course, that could be a slide scale too, depending on where you put the Exodus.
Yeah.
So what I did is I thought, like, I don't want to get hung up on this. So I just said, this is when the Exodus happened. It happened in the New Kingdom period and moved on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the sad part is that the ESV Study Bible doesn't even give the option sometimes to show that there's two views. They just put one view out as the authoritative view, and so the general public that are not educated and don't understand are given the impression that this is what it is.
Right.
And it's debatable. And I think that to be fair in scholarship, they should at least, the NIV at least did that. And Bryant's a good scholar and it puts out those, he'll argue for the early, but at least puts out the two options and shows there is a debate, whereas the ESV Study Bible didn't do that, or at least not as strong a way as I would have liked to have seen. So
right. Well,
that's my take.
Then you can go to an actual, one thing can lead to another. Like personally for me, I don't have the harvest one yet. I need to get that. But I do have the other two. And I also have them downloaded onto Kindle. So if in a resource, I can just get to it. I don't have to worry about it on the shelf somewhere. But those can lead to okay, then we go to the academics. Let's say if I go to the resource where it gives like a bibliography, and then I look up the bibliography, now it starts to name archaeologists. So now you look up the archaeologist that actually did the dig, and possibly you can get a hold of a journal. I got journals, right?
Yeah.
I got several of them stacked up here too, because this keeps on going. Here's the journal of Varus.
Yeah.
So let's say I read the article and I said, and underneath was and then I typed it in, and then I Googled it, and then I found out, well, there's these articles, and there's the archaeologist. And this is Manfred B. talking of Varus. So now I go into this and I read more about directly from the archaeologist.
Yeah.
And as you read the article from the journal, that could be kind of a little bit different than what you actually read in the book. It's so, but if you don't take it too awful seriously, it can be a lot of fun. It's an education. And to be fair, like Dr. Graves said, showed all the viewpoints. I said, well, this is what it says. Early, I should say, the maximalist said this, the minimalist said this. And when I say minimalist, there's different degrees of minimalist too. Like then you get the highly critical. Face it, no Exodus at all. What we're looking at is tradition, myth, and early Israel being a unification of Canaanite tribes. All right. And well, with that, those are basically really the big viewpoint with the Exodus right there. Right.
Yeah.
So when you look at these books and you buy them, that is step one. And then you can go to step two. It gets in detail.
Now, what was interesting on the ESV Study Bible is that of the 14 scholars that put together the articles, they were divided up according to, just have a look here, according to the different chapters and their different specialties. So some of the articles are better in one part of the ESV Study Bible than the other because it's dependent on a particular individual. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think the NIV had a larger number of individuals, and it wasn't connected to any particular, well, I guess it is connected in some way to a particular view or idea. But for example, what was the Boyd Sievers did one section, and the paper on both of them is very thin.
Yes.
And I wouldn't recommend using a highlighter in them because it'll bleed through the pages really easy. And in fact, you can sort of see some of the pictures from the back of the other page bleeding through. So a ballpoint pen or even that sometimes bled through for me, or a graphite pencil is really the best to write on your pages if you like to make notes. Here we have the biographical sketches. David Chapman and Mark Chavalis and John Curd, of course. Richard Hess, Larry Herr, Gerald Mattingly. There was one lady, Catherine McDowell. They're all PhDs. Boyd Seaver, he dug with us. Oh, Steve Ortiz is the other one. Professor of archaeology. So there are some big names in the ESV one, but for example, John Curd does Genesis to Deuteronomy. So that section on the early part reflects his views. And from what I can read, he's fairly a minimalist in a lot of respects. Steve Ortiz does Joshua to Ruth, and he takes a late date. So it's reflected in his notes. Mark Wilson does Acts and Revelation. I know Mark, we did our PhD in Revelation at the same time period, back in 2000. And so his material in Revelation is very well done, and good solid material there on the imperial cult and backgrounds. So the book is divided up according to their specialty in the different areas for the footnotes, the little notes that they have written at the bottom. So it reflects individuals, whereas the NIV sort of wants to hide that and just trying to give some general information. And I just find the articles better in the NIV than I did the ESV one.
Right. Okay. Well,
That's my personal view, and others can disagree with it if you like the Maximalist view. And but like I said, get all three, couple of my books, and you'll have a good library.
yeah, it's very fair. If you say you want to read a maximalist view, you were fair to say which of the NIV does pretty much like you said, Bryant Woods, his opinion on that. You know where you're going to go. As soon as you see Bryant Woods, you're going to be maximalist. Boom. John Currid, I only heard him lecture maybe once or twice. So with that, I couldn't determine where he is on the sliding scale. Well, I'll take your word for it. If he's more like of a minimalist, then I understand. If I read this, I'm going to get the minimalist point. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
But I
would say he's a conservative, but he just leans more to a minimalist view, and
sure,
leans more on the other side. Like you said, there's a spectrum to these. No, you can't place everybody in a particular, pigeonhole. But just knowing that going in, being aware of that, understanding their biases. We all have them. I have them. You have them. Everybody's got them. Just being honest with our biases, being upfront with them, and people can pay your money and take your choice.
Very true. I mean, I was listening to a podcast in which I kind of disagreed last night, and I was feeling ornery.
Yeah, that's what happens to me when I watch CNN.
So I did this. Actually, not nasty words or anything, but I just said, like in so many words, I disagreed. And man, I woke up this morning and something goes blip, and I got a return thing, and it gave all these, and it was about yay big, and well, I got what I wanted,
Yeah.
I was bored, so I stirred the pot, Let's see.
Yeah.
I thought, well,
and it's good to have discussion with people that you disagree with, and if you can have a scholarly debate, scholarly discussion without getting all upset. It's hard to do that on social media anymore, but
yeah,
it's important that we have discussions and talk things out, and we can learn from each other. Valuable. Anyway, so that's my 2 cents worth on the 2 archaeological study Bibles. I'd be curious to know if there's any other out there. I know there's some handbooks, like the Harvest Handbook. There's some good resources. The Bible background commentaries are very good for getting a Bible background. They have a lot of archaeology in them as well. So I recommend those. I use those and really enjoy them. I've written the cultural backgrounds of the Old and New Testament book to give my perspective on those as well, sort of given the cultural context. But so there's a lot of different resources out there, but these are 2 that I think they're too big to carry as your handbook. I think your hand Bible to church, because they're too they're really thick, really heavy, and really awkward, but they're great to put on your desk to refer to and to do your study with.
No, more than fair of a review for both. So like you said, I would, even if you did kind of criticize the one, you still said I would buy it.
Well, I have it.
Yeah,
I use it.
Right. So the thing is that there you go, folks. And I agree with that. It might be like I might disagree with, and I do the same thing. I go ahead and buy it, and so it's a resource, and I got a comparison for it. So I'm not just getting one viewpoint, because if it's another viewpoint, then I can turn around and say, well, where did this one come from, and why? And maybe some people, as you said, starting in, some people don't understand that there are scholars that are minimalist and maximalist, and it stems, from the universities too. So,
well, I like to do, I like to compare the 2. So when I'm reading an article on the Hittites, for example, the Hebrew, what did this one say, and then what does this one say, and then you can compare the two. And I do the same thing with my news channels. You know, you got to shop around the different news because some are a little more conservative, some are a little more liberal, and you can kind of weigh the information. And then somewhere in the middle, you find the truth. And the same thing with your study Bibles.
Talking about news, because of all the stuff that's going on in the Middle East, you also got news channels that are Christian owned and operated or have some kind of religious. And I find it personally, I find it's like everything, something happens. Man, this fulfills the prophecy. Like, what happened to just news? All of a sudden, and we're looking for this, like they're turning the Bible, and this is right here today. We're right here today. It's like, well, to me, I get kind of entertained by some of it a little bit. You know, this is like, and the word of prophecy is for the day, and I go, oh, I said the day's only 24 hours. By the time you figure out the prophecy, we'll be through this day.
Yeah.
I'm just being mean, people, but that, like I said, I like to stir the pot a little bit, but anyway, if you don't have these books and you want a resource for archaeology, there you have it, folks. A good review on these two books and also the Harvest book. And don't forget our buddy over here, Dr. David Graves. And you get his book as well. Great resource material. Mine are black and white, like he said. You can get them in color. I do recommend these. A lot of good material in here. And like he said, tons and tons of receipts. So if you want to dig deeper, you got that material as well, which that's what I like to do. I do that, you know, like you said, I had the journal right here. I showed people. I'll go to the journal and say, what does the archaeologist say that's got his nose in the dirt for 15 years? What do they say? But even the archaeologists can have a viewpoint. They could be minimalist, they could be maximalist. You know, we got to be aware of this. It can be a lot of fun. You know, sometimes you pick a fight, but the fight is a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, it's not a matter of they may have it. We all have it. That's our bias.
We do.
So we all have it. So it's just a matter of figuring out what that bias is. I wear mine on my sleeve, but some scholars don't. And so that's why you got to dig a little deeper sometimes to find out where they're coming from. And once I know where they're coming from, then I understand, you know, the interpretation they're going to give on a particular site or artifact. So that's why, and in my book, I provide both sides of the arguments, so people can weigh it fairly. So I take a conservative view on things, but I provide both the maximalist and minimalist sources and the footnotes, so people can weigh it over and, like you do, George, get the primary material and read it yourself.
Okay. So today, I thank everybody for listening in and also getting an idea of what type of archaeological books to buy if you want study material. Thank you for your time. Also, thanks for all the subscribers. It's been really, really fantastic here in the last couple of weeks. Really appreciate that, folks. Dr. Graves, thanks for your time. We're going to sign off. And everybody have a good day. Appreciate it.